Today's learning, as you know, and we'll be speaking more about this when Rabbi Berman gives the Yortzeit Shir at 9:15. The day is dedicated Le'ilui Nishmat Rav Simcha ben Avram HaKohen Perel, who was Rabbi Simcha Krauss, who for many years was a beloved member of the yeshiva, of the faculty. But more than that, and we'll talk about, as I said, Berman will talk more about that. So he was a person who actually, as it were, retired to the yeshiva 17 years ago. Came to maybe it was 18 already, years ago. He came to Eretz Yisrael after having had a prolific career, many different roles in the American rabbinate. Came to Israel, and we were fortunate enough to be able to snap him up. And he was he on every level, whether it was one-on-one learning with the guys, shiurim, etc. So he was very much a very valued member of the faculty, someone that all of the Rebbeim learned from. If you will, he was a Rebbe to the Rebbeim. And then he left us for a few years. And the reason why he left us really is found in our Parsha. Sheni of the Parsha is Act 2 of Yitro's coming to Moshe Rabbeinu. Yitro seeing Am Yisrael. The first act was Yitro and Moshe, or Yitro and Am Yisrael, which we read just a few moments ago in the Rishon of the Parsha. And then Act 2 is the Bacharat, in the morning. And Yitro sees Moshe from morning to night judging the Am, and he tells him that this is not going to last. Navol tibol, you're not going to be able to hold this throughout. You need to have a core of individuals who are going to be and act as the dayanim, as the judges, as the shoftim. And that's why Rav Krauss left us. Rav Krauss left because he felt he was offered a position in what became known as the International Beit Din, a Beit Din that was formed basically to save agunot, to save women who had been caught in marriages where the husband refused to give a get. And in this context, what Yitro tells Moshe Rabbeinu as the type of person who should be the shofet is very telling. Because Yitro says, who should you pick? Mikol ha'am, from the entire nation. It should be open, if you will, to everyone. It's a democratic process in the sense of who is eligible. It's not something which is going to be determined by one's yichus, but rather it's mikol ha'am. And what are the characteristics of that dayan? Anshe chayil yirei Elokim. And I'm going to just use the translation here. Men of accomplishment, God-fearing people. See if that holds. Anshe emet, people of truth. Sonei vatza, those who despise money. That's the translation if you take a look at the Art Scroll translation. Those four things. You have Anshe Chayil, Yirei Elokim, Anshe Emet, Sonei Vatza. Those four characteristics fit Rav Krauss to a T. I'm not going to go through each and every one. I'm just going to specifically speak of the aspect, if you will. Anshe Chayil, the Yirei Elokim really go together. Anshe Chayil v'Yirei Elokim, as understood, I'm going to basically give you a conglomerate of the different parshanim here. It means that someone who is a man of accomplishment, to use the translation, but a chayil means that someone who is willing to fight. Willing to fight because Yirei Elokim. If you take a look throughout Tanakh, throughout Chumash, whenever the term Yirei Elokim appears, it always refers to, and usually it doesn't necessarily refer to Jews. It refers to someone who is willing to take a stand against what is expedient for them because of a moral position. Et Elokim ani yareh, Yosef tells Moshe, tells his brothers, I'm not going to take advantage of you. I'm going to be fair and just because I fear God. And they don't know that he's Jewish. They don't know he's Yosef. It's just simply morality. The miyaldot ha'ivriot, so whether they are actually Jewish midwives or Egyptian midwives who are responsible for the Jews, et vatirena hamiyaldot et Elokim. They feared God and they refused to listen to Paro's injunction. Time and time again, it's a person who's willing to take a moral stand against popular opinion, against expediency, and that was Rav Krauss. Rav Krauss took a tremendous amount of criticism for his stand in defense of the Agunot because he was willing to go out on a limb when other people weren't willing to go out on a limb. And he stood firm for that. And that connects to the end of those characteristics. Anshe Emet, people of truth, V'sonei Batza. And here, as I said, I'm speaking of a conglomerate, but specifically one dayah that stands out. Rabbeinu Avram ben Arambam on Sonei Batza says, what is Sonei Batza? Sonei Batza is a person who is, he points to the first time that it appears in Tanakh, when Yehuda says, Ma Betza, what good, what will come of it? What's in it for us to kill Yosef? We need something, we want something which is going to benefit us. Sonei Vatza goes along with Anshe Emet, are people who are not looking for their own particular kavod, their own particular interests, but are willing to strive for truth. And that was, of course, Rav Krauss. I just want to give you one small incident that happened here with regard to this. As I mentioned, Rav Krauss was critiqued for some of his positions, and critiqued, to our mind, quite unfairly. And when the one of his critics was here visiting Eretz Yisrael, and so we made a decision at the time that we would, even though it was a person who we'd had before to the yeshiva, we decided that we were not going to invite him to speak to the yeshiva, out of kavod for Rav Krauss. Rav Krauss came to me and said, you know, this person is here in Israel, is he coming to the yeshiva? And I said, no, we decided, you know, I explained to him why we decided that this year we were not going to invite him. And Rav Krauss said, absolutely not. Said, he has his position out of his understanding of what truth is. I have my position out of my understanding of what truth is. He critiqued me, and Rav Krauss was hurt by the criticism. But he said, but this is an Adam Gadol, this is a person who the B'nai HaYeshiva should be exposed to, and insisted that we invite him to the yeshiva, and so we did. Rav Krauss exemplified all of these ideas. He was indeed an Ish Chayil, he was Yirei Elokim, he was an Ish Emet, and he was a Sonei Vatza. Chaval al da'avdin. We have lost a great deal by his not being here. This is his second yard site. All of the learning today should be.
I'm going to send a video out later with a little bit more about Rabbi Krauss's life. We have a video that we did in 2014. We honored him in at our dinner in the United States. I'll tell you a little about the dinner. Maybe that will give you a picture. The dinner we held at a small venue, relatively small venue. We held it at the Chabad House in the Bowery near NYU. I had asked them if they could handle 150 people. They were quite nervous about 150 people. I reached out to different groups. Obviously, they're all the Eretz Tzvi alumni that would be in the New York area. I also reached out to JOFA, which is a Jewish Orthodox feminist organization, and talked to them about sponsoring it because they were one of the sponsors of the Beit-Din for Agunot, to help Agunot. I also reached out to Rabbi Krauss' synagogue in Hillcrest, where he was the rabbi for many years, I think at least 2 decades. And I reached out to his synagogue in St. Louis. He was also a rabbi in Utica, New York. The day snowed. It was snowing, sleeting. It was horrible, and 275 people showed up to a venue which could maybe hold 150. I was hoping the snow would drive people away. We had to have standing room only for the event. It was all to honor Rabbi Krauss. Rabbi Krauss, on the one hand, was an immigrant to the United States. He came in 1948. He survived the Holocaust. Really, it wasn't so difficult for his family, relatively speaking. In Romania, his father had to go into hiding for a brief period of time because his father was a Rav. But by and large, they were okay. He has a wonderful story about his mother. I'm not going to tell that story now, but there are videos about the story of his mother saving her aunt and risking her life for that. After the Nazi downfall, Rabbi Krauss's parents, his father at least thought he would stay in Romania, and when the Russians took over, his mother said no, he had to leave. It was just too difficult. So he went to the United States. A very hardcore Zionist family. His father became a rabbi in Washington Heights. And by a series of strange events, he was a rabbi of a little small synagogue when Rabbi Krauss came to the United States when he was 10. Through a series of strange events, Rav Aaron Kotler had just founded the Beit Midrash Gvoha in Lakewood, New Jersey, and was supposed to speak at a different synagogue, but by chance spoke at Rabbi Krauss's father's synagogue, and they stayed with them, started smoozing with Rabbi Krauss. I guess he at that time was around 17 years old or something. And Rav Aaron Kotler was very excited because he wanted Rabbi Krauss to come study at Lakewood. Lakewood was rather small. He promised him a chavrusa. He promised him he would take care of him. Rabbi Krauss's mother asked one question: will he be able to get a university degree? And Rav Aaron Kotler demurred, so Rabbi Krauss ended up going to Chaim Berlin, where while he was at Chaim Berlin, he also had a chavrusa with Rav Hutner. I'm just trying to tell you the giant we're dealing with. He had a chavrusa with Rav Hutner, and then he asked permission from Rav Hutner to go hear shirim from Rabbi Soloveitchik. Rabbi Krauss would tell a story that because of final exams at the college, he was going to have to miss shiur. So he went to the Rav, and he apologized that whatever morning it was, he had a final exam, he wouldn't be able to go to a shiur. So shockingly, and to many other students' chagrin, Rabbi Soloveitchik changed the time of the shiur because he wanted to make sure Rabbi Krauss could come. I personally have a huge debt to Rabbi Krauss. He came to the yeshiva. He once said to me, he says, "You know, Rabbi Berman, I know what I look like." He looked like this old Europeanish style Daddy Rav. So you might have remembered him when you were young. But he had a koach you couldn't believe. And I thought he was not going to do well in the yeshiva. I'm not kidding you. I spoke to Rabbi Sussman about this numerous times. He knew every single thing about every single student. He knew who was dating whom. He knew who broke up from whom. He knew who was having problems with parents. He would go, "Right, Berman, you should speak to this guy. His girlfriend just broke up with him." It was amazing, right? He knew everything about people, and his colossal understanding of Torah was stupendous. I remember I was doing a wedding once. I was Sadr Kiddushin, and there were some mistakes in the ketubah. So I called Rabbi Krauss immediately, and he gave me straight explanations exactly what to do. It so happens this mistake 1 was fine, mistake 2 was fine. By third mistake, I ripped up the ketubah and started again. Felt like it was channeling Rabbi Soloveitchik. But in any event, Rabbi Krauss carried me through that. And at that particular wedding, a well-known Rosh Yeshiva was there and criticized something I did at the wedding. It was not something which puzzled the wedding, but something which was not to his liking. So I said to Rabbi Krauss, I was a little surprised and I guess hurt by this event. Just to show you what type of person Rabbi Krauss was. So Rabbi Krauss is Rabbi Berman. He always referred to Rabbi Berman. I don't know why. I enjoyed that. On numerous coffees together, he said, Rabbi Berman, you tell him they asked you to do the wedding and not him, which was the root of everything. Rabbi Krauss was a huge defender in that way of the yeshiva, and I personally really relished all the time I had when he spent the 3 years in America. Those of you know him at SAR, and we're going to see that in a second, when he was in America. So when I took over the fundraising hat, I would visit the United States often. My first stop was always to Riverdale to visit Rabbi Krauss. We went out to that, those of you at SAR, what's that like Romanian, Hungarian bakery, not Dunkin' Donuts? So we always went to Grunbaum's for Yakisha Bakery, whatever it was. I don't know these things. I'm from Florida. Yeah, excuse me. So we always went there. We had a coffee, and I never drank coffee before I met Rabbi Krauss. He taught me to drink lots and lots and lots of coffee, and helped me tremendously both in regards to Limud Torah as well as to aiding the yeshiva in keeping the yeshiva going. It was really a wonderful, wonderful experience. What we're going to do now is we're going to watch a video of Rabbi Krauss. It's part of a lecture he gave when he was in the United States in 2019, I think it is, from SAR. It took place on Yom Yerushalayim. It's half the video. The video is about 11 minutes long, 12 minutes long. So we'll watch the video, and then after the video, I'm going to give a shiur, which is really Rabbi Krauss' shiur. Rabbi Krauss spoke at the yahrzeit of his mother a number of years ago. I took the shiur. He spoke, without notes and without anything in front of him. I researched the Mar Makomot and put them on a daf, and we'll learn his Torah, Chiddush he has in Hilchos Talmud Torah, and that's after the video, and then we'll have l'chaim in his honor.
If you think about the Shemona Esrei that we say every day, we speak about Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim ircha b'rachmim tashuv, v'tishkom b'tocha kasher dibarta, uvnei ota b'karav b'yomeinu. Build Yerushalayim in our days. That I understand. And then there's the next sentence. V'chisei David avdecha mehera tachin. And establish the kingdom of David, which is also a very nice bracha. Except, isn't it redundant? Doesn't David have his earlier bracha? David has a bracha already. Es semach David avdecha. Why do we need the second statement about David? V'chisei David mehera tachin. I think that the Mefarshi Tefillah are bothered by that question, but I think the answer is quite simple. What the authors of the Tefillah wanted to tell us is that, of course, Yerushalayim is important. Of course, Yerushalayim has a history, it's the Makam HaMikdash, etc., etc. But without Kisei David, without royalty, without sovereignty, there's something missing in Yerushalayim. The first bracha is for David to become king, fine. There are promises to David, Mashiach, etc., etc. But besides that, what is the symbol of sovereignty? Royalty. Without that royalty, Yerushalayim gives us that royalty. Yerushalayim gives us the ownership of Yerushalayim, the royalty, the sovereignty of Yerushalayim, that we build up Yerushalayim. Because you know why? Yerushalayim, there is in concept in Zohar that there are two kinds of Yerushalayim. The Yerushalayim shel Mala, the heavenly Yerushalayim, and the Yerushalayim shel Mata, the earthly Yerushalayim. Sometimes people forget and they go in the quasi-mysticism. We don't need the earthly Yerushalayim. We only need the heavenly Yerushalayim. Comes the halakha and says, no, you need the Yerushalayim that's here and now, the Yerushalayim that's on earth. As a matter of fact, if you remember your Tanakh, when the proclamation of Koresh was made to go up to Yerushalayim, what does Koresh say? Koresh says that Upokad Hashem alai, and God has commanded me, livnot bayit, to build the home, b'Yerushalayim asher b'Yehuda, in Jerusalem that's in Yehuda. We don't know that. As a matter of fact, that's one of the first psukim in Ezra. It's also the very last to go up to Yerushalayim that's in Yehuda. What does it mean, Yerushalayim that's in Yehuda? Why do you have to tell me? No, because you should know that Yerushalayim is down. It's here on earth. And when is Yerushalayim successful? Not only with the heavenly Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim is successful when it's here on earth. When you build it right here on earth, when you build the capital, and you go to Yerushalayim, and it's so beautiful, and it's so nice, and people, I sometimes, when I'm in Yerushalayim, I go to Yad Vashem. And I'm very depressed when I come out of Yad Vashem. And all of a sudden, when I go out, I see, what do I see? The building cranes. And I see the traffic jams. And in New York, I hate the traffic jams. But in Yerushalayim, I say, Shechianu, you know why? Because it shows that Yerushalayim is alive and thriving and bubbling. And it's fantastic. That's the Yerushalayim Asher B'Yehuda. That's the Yerushalayim Asher B'Yehuda. That is what Yerushalayim has added to us. Yerushalayim was added, and it added, we're 10 feet taller because of Yerushalayim. We're proud because of Yerushalayim. There's a fantastic question that people ask. In Chumash in Dvarim, you will read about the fact of the halacha of Arei Miklat. Somebody who kills accidentally, in order to protect him, he runs to the Arei Miklat, to the cities of refuge. So the Gemara says in Sote, many places, the Gemara says that when one of the ordinances for every city was that when you make signs, street signs, etc., and on the roads, you should also make a sign to say the city of refuge X, 3 miles west, the city of refuge Y, 6 miles east and north, etc. There are signposts for the cities of refuge. Why? To make it easier for the people to run who have to run. We help people. So I want to ask a simple question. Hopefully there were not so many criminals in Jerusalem, in Israel. And nevertheless, we help them. 3 times a year we go on a pilgrimage to Yerushalayim. How come there were no signs anywhere? The Gemara at least doesn't tell us. Yerushalayim, go straight. Make a left turn here, a right turn. Why were there no signs for that? Why did Bezdin worry only about the road signs for the Rotzchim B'Shogeg, for the people who killed? Why wouldn't they worry about the thousands and thousands of pilgrims? You know why? Because the Torah wants as follows. A Jew goes on the road to Yerushalayim, he goes to a pilgrimage, and he doesn't know which way to turn. And then he sees another Jew. Where are you going to Yerushalayim? Which way to Yerushalayim? I don't know. Why are you going to Yerushalayim? Oh, because Yerushalayim is the beautiful city. Oh, because there's so many takanot to make Yerushalayim beautiful. You know what Yerushalayim has? The nicest views and the nicest hotels and the nicest music and the nicest chamber orchestra and the nicest sports team and the nicest yeshivas. That's what the Torah wants us to speak about it. One Jew sees another, and then another is lost. And you say, why do you go to Yerushalayim? Oh, I have family. And why do you go to Yerushalayim? Because it's so nice. Why do you go to Yerushalayim? Because it's so spiritual. Why do you go to Yerushalayim? Because you can touch divinity, so to say. Oh, that's what the Torah wants us to do. And that is the whole idea of Yerushalayim. And that's what Yerushalayim gives us. I want to tell you something an experience that I had. About 20 years ago, it's my experience. 20 years ago, my wife Esther and I were on sabbatical. She will give us a sabbatical, so we were there a year. And of course, you come to Yerushalayim, you love it, you fall in love with it. And we started looking for an apartment. We knew then that we have to end up there, sooner or later. And we're looking for an apartment. So, when you look for an apartment, it could be very tiring. One is in the neighborhood that you want, but it's too big or too small or too fancy or not fancy enough, etc., etc. Finally, we found an apartment. The agent found us an apartment that was exactly in the location, and everything is location, and exactly the kind of size we wanted. Everything was wonderful. We could have moved in right immediately then, except that it was over our budget, over our wildest budget dreams. So, of course, it fell through. As we came out of and the agent left us, I'm going into a depression. And you know what the hell of depression can be? And I felt that I'm going into that hole and I better get out of it because otherwise who knows what will be. I can't tell you how the mind works. But this is what came into my mind. I read a lot about the Shoah. And somehow, I'm a printaholic when it comes to the Shoah. And somehow, the following thing occurred to me, a page from history. You know that there was the Nuremberg trial for the top Nazis. That's in the Western world. But in Russia, there was also a Nuremberg trial for the echelon, for those people who really worked in the gas chambers and in the ghettos and in the concentration camps. And let's go into immediately where the prosecutor asks the defendant, the Nazi defendant, the following question. It's true till about 1942, you killed Jews by shooting them. And then you changed the method, and you didn't shoot them, you started gassing them. Can you give me a reason why you did that? So the Nazi person says, defendant says in a very businesslike, precise Germanic manner, well, it was economic. What do you mean it was economic, as the prosecutor? So the Nazi says, the defendant says, well, if you make an economic calculation, to kill Jews by gun, by rifle, etc., cost $2.20. But you kill them by gas, cost only 25 cents. So we saved the Reich $2 a Jew, because only 25 cents. So as that, I think to myself, what was a Jew worth during the Shoah? 25 cents a Jew was worth during the Shoah. And if a Jew is worth 25 cents, then what is a Jewish house worth? So what is a Jewish house worth in Vilna, in Kovna in 1941 when they killed every Jew in Kovna? Zilch, nothing. And what was a Jewish home worth in Warsaw in 1943 after the revolt? Zilch, nothing. And the Jewish home in Budapest in the beginning of 1945, nothing, zero. You stupid, I said to myself. That's what I said. Pressed because a house in Jerusalem is worth. That shows that there's something there. And if a house is out of your budget, then Jews obviously go tall. If you can't afford that house, that shows that there's life in Jerusalem. There's want in you. People want it. People want to be here. So instead of following the oppression, say a full-throated, Shechiyanu, Vikimanu, Vihigyanu, Lazman Hazeh, to this day when Jerusalem is alive and kicking, and you can't even afford it there. That's brought me out of that depression, because Jerusalem is worth, the sovereignty has given Jerusalem worth. The sovereignty has given it meaning. Yerushalayim can be rebuilt. Yerushalayim can reach the apex. Mi'al Pisgat Har HaTzofim. You have to go to the Pisgat Har HaTzofim to even view Yerushalayim, because Yerushalayim calls you to be high, calls you the best that you can. And that is why, in the Shvuah, Im eshkachech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini, tidbak leshoni lechiki, im lo eskerechi, im lo ale al Yerushalayim arosh shimchasi. There's a fantastic pasuk there. What do we mention? The whole body. We mention the memory, we mention lashon, and we mention hand. What the pasuk is trying to tell us, a Jew has to be involved in Yerushalayim with his whole body. Sometimes he can only remember. It's important. But remember Jerusalem. Sometimes you can do more. Sometimes talk. So talk. Write letters to the editor. Tell the world. Tell your friends. Speak like the two Jews who met on the road. Speak about Yerushalayim. And sometimes, for heaven's sake, you can build it. God gave you hands to build. That is what Yerushalayim is all about. That is why that all these false pilpulim, whether to say Hallel on Yerushalayim or not say Hallel on Yerushalayim, or full Hallel or half Hallel, that's absurd. We all should do what you do today. You're merging the Simcha of Yom Yerushalayim with the Simcha of Rosh Chodesh. So make it even bigger. Let Yerushalayim never be second fiddle and second place. Let Yerushalayim be the choice of your song and all the song. Mi'al Pisgat Har HaTzofim. Shalom Lach Yerushalayim.
just give you a clue. So this is a shiur that Rabbi Krauss gave in about, 15 minutes off the cuff without makarot in front of him. So I spent a while trying to hunt down all the makarot. I mean, some of them were not hard to hunt down. Some of them were a little more esoteric in a sense. But again, he gave this for his brother's yortzeit. And it's apropos for the question of how you relate to children in Talmud Torah. So the Rambam starts out, Nashani Pturim in Talmud Torah, Aval Katan Aviv Hayav Lamdo Torah. Shne'amar Matem Otam Ibnechem B'Rabam. So we have a pasuk in the Torah which says that a father has to teach his son Torah. Look how many times the Rambam emphasizes Chayav. Fine. So there's an obligation for a father to teach his son. But not just his son. Also, what? His grandson. Because B'nei B'necha is mentioned, it's also grandchildren. But don't limit it to your own son, your own grandson. But there is a mitzvah to teach everybody, even if they're not your children. So furthermore, what did we learn? It's not just your children, your progeny, your actual seed, but rather all students, all your students. So Talmidim are called sons. B'nei HaYeshiva. I know that Rabbi Ebner likes to speak about that in Rechaim Volozhin. Imken. So now we're going to get to the point, the nikudah that Rabbi Krauss wanted to spend time on. Imken lama nitzta ve'el b'no ben b'no. So why are you obligated to teach? Why does the pasuk focus on your son and your grandchildren? If it's an obligation, everybody who knows Torah, to teach Torah to everyone who doesn't know Torah, if it's an obligation on every male to teach every other male, so why does it mention children, your children? Laktim b'no l'ben b'no. U'ben b'no l'ben chaviro. To give your son precedence over your grandson, and furthermore, to give your grandson precedence over the child of someone else. And thirdly, the Rabbah mentions, Chayav liskor melamed libano l'lamdo. You have to hire a melamed, someone to teach him. You have to hire, in other words, what you have to do, you got to pay those exorbitant high school tuitions, right? You have to hire a melamed. Ve'nuchayev lamed ben chaviro ela bechinam. But only for your children, not for someone else's children. So Rabbi Krauss asks a question. It says beno, fine, and then the Rambam extends it to ben beno. What about ben beno? What about your neched? What about your nin? Your nin. What about, and Rabbi Tabor was mentioning to me that in the Israeli language they're trying to struggle with what should come after a nin. So your great-grandson, your great-grandchild, what is the obligation to teach him? And we're just as a digression, I was speaking to Rabbi Tabor about this. There was a wonderful interview a few years ago with a woman from Satmar who lived in Israel who had 2,000 descendants, live descendants, right? Incredible, okay? Talking about, Rabbi Krauss was talking about building up Eretz Yisrael. So what about a grandchild? So the Kesef Mishnah discusses a great-grandchild. He says the following. There's two differences according to Kesef Mishnah, right? Those of you by Lachashir who wrote the Kesef Mishnah? Yosef Karo, right? Your author Shulchan Aruch. So he says there's two reasons the Rambam is specifying, or the Gemara in fact, the Torah in fact, specifies your child. One, to b'no kodem, to give precedence to your child over the child of your neighbor. That your first chiyuv, if you have two kids in front of you and you can only have time to teach one, you teach your son first. And second, to b'no chayav liskor lo milamet. And you have to pay for education for your child, but not for another child. Look at the bold print in the Kesef Mishnah. V'efshar ladat Rabbeinu gam leben b'no chayav liskor milamet. So first, Kesef Mishnah says, perhaps the Ram would even agree that you have to hire someone to teach your son, or your grandson. So just like you have an obligation to pay for someone to teach your son, So too, your grandson is separated out from someone else's child. Uben ben beno. And here's the question. What about a great-grandchild? Nearly pashut to kodol ben chavero. It seems to put him in the category of ben beno. It seems to put the great-grandchild in the category of the grandchild. Nakat ben beno v'hu hadin leben ben beno. The Ram would agree that it also applies to great-grandchild. The Torah doesn't say, teach your, what's zarecha? Descendants, your progeny. It doesn't say your progeny. It says your child. Why hava mina benotapa? Because it wanted to discount the obligation of teaching your daughter Torah, which I know we're having a women's Yom Yom. We'll discuss that later on. So, according to the Kesef Mishnah, it would seem that a great-grandchild is the same status as a grandchild, and you have all obligations of a grandchild to hire a malamed, etc., etc. The only problem, as Rabbi Krauss pointed out, is this goes explicitly against the Gemara. The Gemara number 3 there. You want to use many of you guys to learn this Gemara, I assume. I don't know if you pay attention to this Rambam, but here's what the Gemara says in number 3. Ad heichem chayav adam le'medet b'no Torah. What's the extent? Now, when I say what's the extent, what could that mean?
Until when?
What?
Until when?
Until when? How age? It could be age. It could be how much effort, which includes financial effort. It could be how many generations. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel Kagon Zvulun ben Dan Shalido Avi Aviv Mikra Mishnah Talmud Halachot Vagadot. So Zvulun ben Dan, how many generations is that? Zvulun ben Dan Shalido Avi Aviv. How many generations? 3. His grandson. So the grandfather taught Zvulun ben Dan. The grandfather. Mishnah Talmud Halachot Vagadot, and then specifies the broad scope of Torah. And the Gemara continues, Kizvulun ben Dan, v'lo Kizvulun ben Dan, Shlimdo Avi Aviv, that his grandfather taught him. Look at Rashi, Kizvulun ben Dan, Shlimdo Avi Aviv, V'ad heichan am dekamrin, hafi kamrin, and ad heichan adam chayav l'mod Torah, b'dorotav. What's dorotav? His generations, meaning his progeny. Amar Yehuda, l'beno, l'ven beno. According to Rashi, what's the extent of the chiyuv? To what? To a grandchild and not to a great-grandchild. So how did Kesef Mishnah say that he thinks that a great-grandchild has the same status as a grandchild when we have a Gemara which explicitly says, or at least the way Rashi reads the Gemara, let's say that, the way Rashi reads the Gemara, that it only extends to a grandchild and not to a great-grandchild. Furthermore, I just put on him a karot that just to understand that this is a mitzvah, this is a chiyuv. And that's going to be relevant for the Haggadah Amaniyot in a second. So in the Mishnah says, "Manidim kol mitzvot haben al av," and you guys, I think, spend a lot of time on this, right? Kol mitzvot haben al av. Going to the Gemara, what does it mean? How does it relate? Right? Mitzvot that are placed upon the father, etc., or placed on the ben. Chayavim nashim b'tirah. Kol mitzvot ha'av ben. Echad nashim chayavim. Furthermore, the Gemara Kiddushin specifies what those mitzvot are. Right? What are those mitzvot? It's a longer list than I have here. What are those mitzvot? Okay, etc., etc., etc. To give him a bris milah, to redeem him, and to teach him Torah. What happens if the father is not willing to give his son a brit? What do we do? He says, I don't want to do it. I'm not interested in doing it. I don't want to pay the moel. Although, the moels, they don't charge.
They work off of tips.
They work off of tips, right? Tarte mashma. Dylan Condon. Yeah, they work off of tips. They don't charge, but they remind you if you didn't pay, right? It's like, oh no, it's a mitzvah. You can't take money for a mitzvah, but they do remind you often. Don't forget. And the worst. I only had one experience. Other people in this room have had many more experiences than I. I've only had one experience, and a wonderful, wonderful tzaddik moel as well. And I had to ask someone else about paying, etc., etc. But we made sure we took care of that. We gave him a bris, etc. The moel, they always like to hand you the knife. They think it's cute. Do that happen to you guys? Yeah. Here, you want to do it? Want me to do it? You sure? You sure? And then, my wife was nervous I was going to take him up on it. I was like, oh, my chance, after 6 daughters, man, here's my chance. Okay. So the Haggadah Amaniyot, a student of Meir Rothenberg, says the following about the nature of mitzvot. on this issue of Talmud Torah. What happens if a father doesn't want to teach his son Torah? If his father doesn't want to pay for school tuition? Katav Maram Zatzal, and they're not, how far, we're going to talk about how far that goes in a second. Maram Zatzal, that's Maram is Rare of Rothenburg, famous Maram of Rothenburg. The Kaifina Le Lilamdam, you force. How do you force? In all kinds of ways. We're going to see the Rambam, I don't quote here the Rambam, it doesn't appear in the Mishnah Torah, I don't believe, but in the end of Shorish Yud Daled in the Sefer Mitzvot, or it's not because it's in the Shorish Yud Daled, the beginning of the counting Mitzvot, he says you beat them up. Okay, Kaifin Leilam Dam, only Skolahem Alamdim, or you to force them either to teach them themselves, or for them to pay the tuition for a teacher. What's the difference between the mitzvah? That's why I want to emphasize. It's a mitzvah to teach your son Torah. What's the difference between this mitzvah? Mishar aseh, the kafir l'kayem, kamo aseh the sukkah, the chanamanda amar, right? The mitzvah of sukkah, of lulav, we force a person to do it. You don't want to eat in a sukkah, we're going to force you. I know today we're nicer than that. Today we don't force anyone to do anything, and et cetera, et cetera. That's not the halacha. The halacha is we can force people, and we have to talk about that in a larger conversation. I cut out the part where Rabbi Krauss referenced SAR's grand conversations, where we have a grand conversation about forcing people to do mitzvot and the choice of covenantal relationships and whatnot. We can do all that. I can talk that talk too. I just choose not to. Okay, fine. And here's where it gets interesting. Halamayot says, the name of Aram Rutenberg, just like any mitzvah, we force a person to do it. So we would force him to teach his son Torah also, or pay for it. And what about repaying a loan? There's two aspects of that. The borrower, and also discussion about the children of the borrower. What about paying back a loan? We force a person to pay back a loan. Because paying back a loan fulfills also requirement of a mitzvah aseh. That's what Halamanio claims. So too do we force him to teach Torah. Now here's an interesting line. So paying for education is just like another bal chov. So now we have to ask ourselves a question. How much do we have to pay for education? We know that in certain places, like the United States of America, and other places as well, Torah has gone through the roof. How much do you force a person to pay? What about a lulav? Well, there's one lulav in the entire city, and the one person who has it wants to charge everyone $1 million to shake his lulav. Do you have to take out loans for your house to get that one opportunity to shake the lulav on Yom Rishon? So the Gemara Baba Kama kind of deals with this, but then the Rishonim are gonna spell it out. How much do you have to pay to fulfill a mitzvah? And when it goes above a certain amount, you say, I just can't do that. Amar B'Zeiram Rav Huna b'mitzvah ad shlish. In a mitzvah, it's a third. A third of what? Down to a third of your income, or a third of your capital, or a third of something. My shlish, what does it mean a third? Even a shlish beita, if you say a third of a person's house, you got to take out a mortgage to shake that lulav. Allowed to eat each round like tzlata. What would happen if you had 3 mitzvot? And the guy has a lulav, and he has a lulav, he wants to charge you a third of your house for a lulav, a third of your house for an etrog, a third of your house for hadassim, or mashu kazeh. What would happen? You lose your house. Really? That's what the Torah is demanding? On each rami like tzlata mitzvata. If you have 3 mitzvot, lay take the kulibega, lay out the whole house to shake the lulav and etrog, to still in a sukkah. Rather, that statement of Rabbi Zera, what he meant, what Rabbi Zera says, what I meant was a third, you have to add a third to a mitzvah, cost a mitzvah to better the mitzvah. What does that mean? You have 2 etrogim, and one etrog costs more than the other etrog, but the etrog is more expensive, is really beautiful. How much more should I pay for the extra beauty of that etrog, of that mitzvah? So it's a third of the mitzvah, whether or not it's a third of the total, a third of the actual original cost, doesn't matter for our purposes. You see there's a limitation on how much you should spend for a mitzvah. And the Gemara Ketubot even says that we're worried about your money. We don't want you just to waste your money. He says, Gemara Ketubot, Amar Eli, Be'usha hikinu hamibas bez al yozez yoter mechomesh. One who is spending a lot of money, don't spend more than 1/5 of your income. What's that talking about? Anyone know by chance? The context that you both stuck up. How much stuff can I give on my income? Should I give 10%? That's Maser Ksafim, right? Up to 20%. About 20% you should not give for tzedakah. That's what the Gemara says. So there are people who did more, but they warn against doing that. Indeed, the Rosh is very concerned. The Rosh and the Rosh, I'm going to put the Rosh with. One thing that's important to those guys in my shir, putting together Dr. Bakar, I always like to have like cat to keep them on one page. On either side, and the Rosh was just too much room and too much time. But the Rosh spells this out. The Rosh writing, the Rosh when the Rosh overlapped a little teeny bit when the Rosh moved to Spain, and they have a similar approach. The Rosh quotes the name of the Ravid, but the Rosh quotes it here. Shmayin she'ein adam mechil livvazvez hon ra bishvil mitzvah achat. You should not spend too much of your money for one mitzvah. If the lulavim are just too darn expensive, you don't buy a lulav. Vafili mitzvah overet, kagon etra lulav, even like a mitzvah overet. Fine, that's great. So what about Talmud Torah? If Talmud Torah is like Shar mitzvot, we could say, oh, don't spend too much money. But you know what Ron Rudenberg said? He compared Talmud Torah not just other mitzvot, he compared it to something else as well. Paying back a loan. Let's say you borrowed 90% on your home, a mortgage, Israeli mortgage, right? Israeli mortgage is like, 40%, 50%. American mortgage, you borrowed 95% on your home before the whole debacle. 95%. How much you got to pay back of that loan? What? We just said, don't be about this. You're terrible. Don't spend too much money. Don't spend over the amount of money, don't spend over a fifth. Don't waste your money. What would the bank say to you if you said, well, I'm only going to pay back 20% of the loan that I took out? They're going to go to the United States government and say, we're too big to fail, and please pay us for our jets. But that's a different story, right? Of course, no one will loan money. You have to pay back the loan. So when it's a mitzvah to pay back the loan, the mitzvah to pay back the loan is not like other mitzvot. The mitzvah to pay back the loan is to pay back the entire thing, right? It's learned out from keeping your word, etc. Fine, so you have to keep your word. Well, the Ram Rudenberg compared that to Talmud Torah. He said you have to spend a lot of money for Talmud Torah. That much closer to a loan. Okay, so what's the deal? We start out with a question. The Kesef Mishnah said that the dinim of the Rambam of teaching your son Torah seems to apply probably to your grandson, paying for him, and he put a category of the same thing with great-grandson. But is it really like a loan? If your great-grandson, you have to pay his whole tuition bill? That can be quite extensive. So Rabbi Krauss wanted to make a suggestion based on Hilchot Tzedakah. Hilchot Tzedakah, we know, let's skip to the Rambam. Look at number 15. Ani Jew Krovo Kodem L'Kol Adam. There's an obligation, Hilchot Tzedakah, to give tzedakah first to Krovo. What's Karov? A relative. So if a relative needs money and a average person you don't know, they both come and knock the door at the same time, and all you have is, the 10 shekel coin, 20 shekel bill. Right, that's it. You're going to give, that's it you're giving. So who do you give to? Your Karov. Your obligation to your Karov first. Ani Shu Karov Kodem L'Kol Adam. La'ani Beito, Kodmin La'ani Iro. And those poor people of your home, your immediate family, they take precedence over the poor people of your city. La'ani Iro, Kodmin La'ani Iro Cheret. They also take precedence, Ne'amar, La'chicha L'necha, O'necha B'artzecha. So it's a pasuk which says that the Aniyim, it gives a series of levels, and the Gemara mentions those levels are the closer to you, the closer obligation. So if it's your child, you have an obligation. So Rabbi Krauss wanted to suggest that really in the Kesef Mishnah we can understand there are two obligations. There's one obligation There's one obligation, which is to teach Torah, or teach Torah to everyone. Right? And there's another obligation to pay money to teach Torah. Money to teach Torah, it's clear you have to do that for your son. Kesef Mishnah seems to imply a grandson and a great-grandson in the same categories. Rabbi Krauss wants to say no. We can say there are two halachas here, two dinim. One din is the din of precedence. Who do you have to teach first? When you are going to spend money, or alternatively, you're just going to teach someone and you have a great-grandson or someone else's child, then the great-grandson, just like Hilchot Tzedakah, takes precedence. When it comes to the financial issue, that's what Rashi was referring to, that it only applies to the grandson and not to the great-grandson. The financial obligation is only limited, the Rambam implies, maybe only to your son, but maybe also to a great-grandson, the Kesef Mishnah says, but not, sorry, to a grandson, but not to further generations. So therefore, there are two halachot. One, your obligation of precedence, kedima, triage. I only have 15 minutes to teach Torah. My son, my grandson, and my great-grandson take precedence over my neighbor. And then there's a financial obligation that only extends to me and maybe to, according to Kesef Mishnah, according to the grandson as well. Yeah.
What's the reason it stops at the grandson? Because they don't want to spend too much money?
I don't know, I could come up with a start. Maybe yes.
What's the reason behind
The derivation is for the pasuk only mentions B'necha B'nei B'necha, not B'nei B'necha, so we could learn it from the pasuk. I'll tell you, when that woman with the 2,000 descendants, children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, great-great-grandchildren, she said a funny thing. She said that the great-grandchildren stopped relating to the great-grandparents. The only relationship she really had is with the next generation, so grandchildren, children and grandchildren. So at a certain point in time, while it's like tzedakah, it's ani ircha, it's like your person you're close to, there has to be some sort of limitation. The pasuk implies, and the Gemara implies, that only goes those generations. That Ad Khan, Rabbi Krauss, I want to add a little something at the very end. The Ram points out famously that there are three Ketarim, the three crowns that Am Yisrael were crowned by: Keter Torah, Keter Kahuna, and Keter Malchut. Keter Malchut was taken by David HaMelech. Rabbi Krauss spoke beautifully about the complexity of nobility and also taking possession. That's David HaMelech. David HaMelech is the king. There's also Keter Kahuna. Keter Kahuna was given to Aharon and his sons. Rabbi Krauss, as a very proud Kohen, also fall into that category. And I would even say, although Keter Malchut only applies to David, there's a certain aspect of majesty that Rabbi Krauss certainly projected, which is relevant or related to, similar to Keter Malchut. But the one Keter which is Munach, for anyone who wants to take it, is Keter Torah. Anyone! You don't have to be a descendant of David, and you don't have to be a descendant of Aharon. You don't take Keter Torah. That's for everyone. Rabbi Krauss loved Torah. One of the beautiful things in our Beit Midrash is that he and Mrs. Ebner's brother, Rabbi Teitz, they used to have a charuta in the Beit Midrash. It's funny, I caught them once using Art Scroll. I pointed out, using Art Scroll Gemara, they said, yeah, do you want to see the notes we have about where they're wrong? So they're keeping a whole list they're going to send to Art Scroll. A lengthy list, by the way. But the two of them, are retirees, and Rabbi Krauss didn't want to retire. He wanted to come and teach in the yeshiva. And Rabbi Krauss really brought his name. People say that the name defines the person. There's a beautiful piece in one of the later Hasidic thinkers, Hasidic Rebbe's, of Avram Sakachev, an introduction to his work on Hilchot Shabbat. He says, we know the goal in learning Torah, and Rabbi Krauss certainly excelled in this, was Torah Lishma. There's a problem, we don't know what Torah Lishma is. What does it mean, Lishma? For its name's sake. Rav Chaim Volozhin spent a lot of ink trying to define what it means to learn Torah for its name's sake. And the Sakachev Rebbe says, people think that learning Lishma means, without any, almost totally objectively, like you're a computer, have no connection to it, have no hana from it, have no benefit from it, have no simcha. And he said, nothing could be further from the truth. Look at the second paragraph, number 17. Adarabba, ki ze ikar mitzvah limud Torah. The ikar of limud Torah liyotzas v'sameach v'mitaneg b'limudo is to have joy, simcha in your learning. And that simcha, by the way, is infectious. Those people who really love Torah, when I would see the two of them learning there, the hashpah, the influence they had on the entire Beit Midrash, everyone walked in and was enlightened. I heard that at SAR in the days, the 3 years that he was there, Rabbi Krauss used to go to the high school, would hang out in high school and not talk about and learning and motivate people in that direction. Just the love of learning, the simcha, the joy of learning Torah can be infectious and spread, impact everyone. I came across a beautiful idea of this nature of Kohanim and their impact of Torah. There are two things which really connect Am Yisrael to Kodesh Baruch Hu. One is mitzvot in general, but tefillah specifically. Tefillah is the focus of dveikut, of clinging to God. So Chaim Legend quotes the famous midrash about David Melech prayed to Kodesh Baruch Hu that saying Tehillim should be considered with kavanah. Saying Tehillim with kavanah, praying in other words, should be as great as Nagaim B'olot. And the other aspect of connecting Am Yisrael to Kodesh Baruch Hu is Torah. And look at this beautiful thing by the priest Tzaddik Cohen. He says the following. The Kohen, and this, by the way, he's discussing, Tzaddik is going through a series of discussions in this little piece in the Kuntres on Shabbat, and it's Zion, at Shabbos itself, of each Chag. He goes through each Chag and talks about the uniqueness of each holiday. And one aspect of the holiday here, he's discussing Shmini Atzeret. The last time Rabbi Krauss really gave a shir to the whole Beit Midrash was Erev Shmini Atzeret, was at the Yortzeit lecture from Mr. Fryer that he gave on Hoshana Rabbah, just before Shmini Atzeret. So this made me think of him as well. So he says on Shmini Atzeret, Zeu Kedusha Shmini Atzeret, Denisnach, Ani V'Atav Yichud. On Shmini Atzeret, we know that the Chag of Sukkot, according to the Gemara, is for the Shivim Amim, all the nations get together, but the Shmini Atzeret, the last day, is unique, is specified just for Am Yisrael to connect to God. It's just for us. The korbanot change, the spirit changes, everything changes. V'zeu hachana d'harninu v'gomer, su'u zimra, sing songs, praise to God, the yismach Hashem b'ma'asav, that Hashem should have joy with our actions, the yismach Yisrael osav, and Am Yisrael should be joyous with God. That's the party we have on Shmini Atzeret. V'zeu simchat hamelach, shemekalsin oto v'beito kach. And the joy is when we go for the Chag to stay with God one extra day, davening, learning, connecting. That's the simcha of Am Yisrael Hashem and Hashem with Am Yisrael. Shalzeh Hashem b'riyat olam. That's why God created the world. The simcha abanim kishozochim lekales elim shabayim. V'kiyadu aperish v'al hakol anat modim lach v'al tolot zeh ulei kulam ma zochim liyot modim lach. The whole context here is the obligation of Aharon. Aharon as the catalyst in the Beit HaMikdash to bring joy between Am Yisrael and Kadosh Baruch Hu. With the language, I just got a little part here. Aharon shushubina de matronita. You know what matronita means? Matronita? Matronita is the maiden. In this case, a maiden either is a Shekhinah or it's the Torah itself. Right? So the job of Aharon, B'nai Aharon, is to bring joy between Kadosh Baruch Hu and Am Yisrael through Tefillah and through Torah in the Beit HaMikdash. And it's exactly what Rabbi Simcha Krauss did. He brought joy, HaKohen Krauss did, is he brought joy as, not only in Birkas Kohanim, but in his infectious love of Torah and love of Klal Yisrael. I hope you got a little snippet of that notion just from that love of Eretz Yisrael. I can't, you guys have really lost out on this, but at least you can get like a sliver, a glimpse, and sort of a spark of what that man meant to the yeshiva and meant to Klal Yisrael.